There is a country where winter is not a season, it is a verdict. Canada's mountain ranges run like walls across the land. The Rockies, the Selkirks, the Laurentians, each one beautiful, each one indifferent to human survival. Mountains do something quiet and lethal. They trap cold air in valleys, they pull snowfall from clouds that have no business being that heavy. They make distance feel like an ocean. Between 1885 and 1916, Rogers Pass in the Selkirks became a graveyard. 200 railway workers buried under avalanche snow, not in battle, not in disease, in geography. The mountains didn't aim, they simply existed. And in existing, they made winter into something communities could not outlast without dying first. In rural Quebec, the Laurentian mountains surrounded entire townships, not dramatically, quietly. They pressed inward every November. By January, they had sealed every road, every path, every escape. A child with a high fever, a man with a broken leg, a woman in difficult labor. In summer, these were emergencies. In Laurentian winter, they were sentences. Doctors knew. They made house calls on horseback in October. By February, horseback was impossible. Snowshoe travel took hours through terrain that would kill an exhausted man. Geography decided who lived. Joseph-Armand Bombardier was born in 1907 in Valcourt, Quebec, a small town shaped by Laurentian hills on every side. He grew up watching winter close the world. He grew up believing it shouldn't. As a teenager, Bombardier was already disassembling engines, building tracked contraptions in barns. His neighbors found it amusing. His father found it exhausting. The machines kept moving anyway. He opened a garage in Valcourt in 1926. 19 years old, he fixed what others gave up on. He imagined what others couldn't see. The mountains outside were still there, still waiting. On January 18, 1934, Yvon Bombardier developed a fever. He was 2 years old. Acute appendicitis. The hospital in Sherbrooke was 50 kilometers away. The road was buried. Joseph-Armand looked at the snow. He had machines in his garage. None of them could cross what winter had made of that road. His son died before dawn. There are moments that rewrite a person. That night in January rewrote Bombardier completely. The grief was enormous. The decision it produced was larger. He returned to the garage, not to escape the grief, to answer it. If snow could not be cleared, then something had to move through it. Time equals, quote, 500 milliseconds, quote, / greater than something no road required. The engineering problem was brutal in its simplicity. Deep powder snow collapsed under wheel pressure. A vehicle needed to distribute its weight across a much larger surface. It needed tracks. Bombardier spent 3 years in that garage. Iterations, failures, rubber tracks that split in cold, sprockets that stripped in deep powder. The mountain winter tested every solution and broke most of them. In 1937, the B7 was ready. 7 passengers, tracked rubber drive, a front ski steering system. It could cross snowfields that swallowed horses. It could climb inclines that stopped everything else. His first customers were not wealthy adventurers. They were rural doctors who had watched patients die on impassable roads. They were priests reaching isolated parishes. They were the people the mountains had punished longest. The machines saved lives, not metaphorically, literally. Children with appendicitis who reached hospitals, men with broken limbs who survived, women whose births were attended by doctors. The geography had not changed, the equation had. Orders came from across Quebec, then Ontario, then other provinces. Bombardier's garage in Valcourt grew into a factory. Mountains hadn't moved, but their power over human life was fracturing. In 1942, the B-12 followed, larger, more capable, able to transport logging crews, mining teams, military supply lines. The Second World War was ongoing, and the Canadian military had noticed Bombardier's machines. Then came the C-18, snow buses, entire communities transported across mountain winter. Schools stayed open. Goods moved. Villages that winter had silenced began to speak again throughout the year. By the 1950s, the isolation these mountains had imposed for generations was ending, not because the mountains had changed, because one man in a Valcourt garage had refused to accept their terms. Then came 1959, and everything changed again. Bombardier filed a patent for a single-passenger tracked snowmobile. He called it the Ski-Doo, a name that almost didn't exist. The prototype was nearly called the Ski Dog. The Ski-Doo transformed the mountain, not as a killer to be defeated, as a playground. The same slopes that made survival impossible now became the reason people arrived. Mountains as destination. The irony runs deep. The terrain that had sealed villages for months, that had made a 50-kilometer road a death sentence, now generated a global recreation industry. Mountains created grief. Mountains created fortune. Joseph-Armand Bombardier died on February 18, 1964. Time equals 600 milliseconds / greater than he was 56 years old. He had been diagnosed with cancer the previous year. He did not live to see what his company would become. His sons continued. Then his grandsons. The company pivoted into aerospace, rail transportation, and business aviation. Each expansion carried the logic of its origin. Movement through conditions that resist movement. By 2024, Bombardier Incorporated employed over 70,000 people. Revenue exceeded $7 billion annually. The Bombardier family's wealth had crossed into billionaire territory. Time equals 650 milliseconds / greater than, all of it traced back to a buried road in 1934. Rogers Pass in the Selkirks now carries the Trans-Canada Highway. A tunnel protects travelers from the avalanches that killed 200 men. The mountain hasn't changed. The infrastructure around it has. The Laurentian mountains of Quebec still surround Valcourt. They still receive 400 centimeters of snow each winter. But Valcourt now has a Bombardier museum. The same hills, completely different story. Geography is not destiny. That is the simplest reading of this story. Time equals 650 milliseconds / greater than. But the more honest reading is different. Geography is a problem. Problems create inventors. Inventors create industries. Industries create dynasties. But the tragedy is real. Yvon Bombardier was 2 years old. Hundreds of unnamed people died in those same mountain winters, and their deaths created no industry, no legacy, no museum, only absence. The mountains remain indifferent. They do not mourn Yvon, they do not celebrate the Bombardier fortune. They receive snow in November and surrender it in April. They will do so long after every name in this story is forgotten. What Bombardier invented was not merely a vehicle. He invented a new relationship between human beings and the terrain they inhabited. He proved that geography is not a wall. It is a problem waiting for its engineer. Canada's mountain ranges did not become less dangerous after Bombardier. Avalanches still fall, winters still isolate, people still die in remote terrain, but the margin between survival and death shifted dramatically. One invention, 3 years in a garage, a dead child's quiet wait behind every decision. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing. It is a small action, but it ensures these stories continue to exist. If you want to directly support the creation of future documentaries, Super Thanks is available below. And write in the comments, where are you watching from? Had you heard this story before? The mountain is still there. It does not know your name. It does not know Yvon's name. It does not know the name Bombardier. It only knows November. It only knows the weight of snow. Some problems are solved, some are transformed, some simply wait inside the mountain for the next person desperate enough to answer them. The snow will fall again. It always does.